Things are about to get weird. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. I've got a real freaky one for you guys tonight, straight from the 1960s, but it's gonna look a little bit different than you're used to. We've got a 3/4 size Les Paul Jr. in the double cutaway variation. And you heard me right, this is still called a Les Paul, but apparently it was also the first model to be called SG within the ordering catalogs. But before we can fully appreciate this, let's do a little bit of history. Solid body electric guitars for Gibson starts with the Les Paul model being introduced for its first main year in 1952. They followed that up with a more affordable version in 1954 known as the Les Paul Jr. It had a single P90 pickup and a wrap tailpiece design. Lacked the maple top, it was just a nice slab mahogany, sometimes maple body, with a Brazilian rosewood fretboard adorned with dot inlays and a very basic, simple headstock. You would find them in a vintage kind of tobacco sunburst finish, and eventually a TV limed mahogany model was also introduced. And then slightly later, there was also a special, which introduced a second pickup to the operation, but those all had the single cutaway shape until 1958. I call it the great disfigurement of 58, when they introduced this one, the double cutaway. As we were saying though, both are still considered Les Pauls. So that's the basic history many people know. However, there are variations to be aware of, and there's the three big ones. A, left-handed, very rare in the 50s, but occasionally they do pop up and sell for big money. But then the other two are tenor and 3/4 size instruments. We won't get too far into the tenors today, but basically, those are 4-string electric guitars created to help transition banjo players into playing a solid body electric. Those things are just so goofy looking. I mean, look at this. Tenor Les Paul Special. You can also find tenor SG standards. There's one out there with a Firebird headstock. I've also seen like really high-end arch tops like L5s in tenor status. And then what we're primarily focusing on tonight is the 3/4 sized instruments. Now from the top, you might think, that's some weird stuff going on. But if I flip it on over to the back and show you nothing else, it's the regular body size as far as I'm aware. All they did was put a shorter neck on here. These are a 22 3/4 inch scale. Now you might be doing the math. Hey, 24 3/4 to 22 3/4. The math isn't mathing. That's because they took the 3/4 name from the classical world of instruments, like a 3/4 sized violin. The true dimension is about 9/10 of the original scale length, but to stick with tradition, that's why they called them 3/4. So why on earth would somebody want this? Well, just like the violins, somebody with smaller hands or a child who wants to get an early start on playing might prefer the shorter scale length and spacing. But needless to say, they did not make too many of these. If we can believe shipping ledgers that we have access to, from the years 1954 through 1960, there were 19,035 juniors made between the two different body styles. Now, how many of those were 3/4 size? 787. And you heard me right, both body styles. This is just the double cutaway. They also made the single cutaway, and if you're wondering why, hey, I've never seen one of those before, it's because the original single cutaway 3/4 size actually looks about the same. Outside of the slightly shorter neck situation, they made about 425-ish of those from 1956 to 58. Whereas if we come back to this one, why it looks so strange is they sank the neck deeper into the body. So while we do have 19 frets, really only, 14, 15-ish are super accessible. And this is just a random hypothesis guess, since these did not come out until 1959 and the regular body shape was in 58. Maybe they realized, some of these are breaking and shipping or people are complaining. So for the 3/4, let's sink it farther in. And maybe that'll help the situation. And due to that, they sold just a little less of these. But if you think their appearance makes these things cheaper on the used market, I mean, they're relatively affordable for a 50s Gibson, but they're still fairly expensive. I don't see many people buying these for their kids anymore, but I do know of a few artists who just love that reduced scale length. Because you can feel like you're Buckethead or Paul Gilbert or anybody with your super crazy fret stretches. And I'm really excited to try it out for the first time. Now, despite everything we've just said, it's important to take note that just because something's way more rare doesn't mean it's valuable. Generally speaking, the 3/4 size variant will be worth less than the full-sized. simply due to demand. Most people buying their first one want the full scale length. And if you like the idea of this, please keep in mind there were other 3/4 size instruments within Gibson's catalog, such as the ES-125, the ES-140, and even the ES-120 model. They did 3/4 size single cutaway melody makers, as well as the later DC-shaped melody makers. If 1P90 is not enough for you, I've also seen the special in the double cutaway shape as a 3/4 size. To be real here, I think that design looks a little bit more appealing, but they also had some acoustics built like this, such as the LG acoustic or the B25. I'm sure I'm missing a few, but hopefully this information helps start you right on your journey into looking into these. But I thought this would be helpful to see it side by side a regular size one. It really is quite a bit shorter. Now, to be fair, this is not a 50s original. It's a Billy Joe Armstrong model, but perhaps this is where the 3/4 size thing comes from. Let's take a quick overall dimension. So starting at the top of our headstock, running down, looks like we're about 34 inches. And now our other one, I get 38.5. So even though it looks significantly smaller, that whole 9/10 thing does indeed seem to ring true. But we're not done yet. There's something else that's special about this one, and it's the whole reason why it's on the show. I was contacted by a viewer named Kevin. He's located outside of the United States and wanted to use my forwarding service. However, he doesn't actually want to use the guitar. He's actually going to consign this with me. He was after strictly the case. So here's the thing, not all of these even had a case as far as I understand. It was an upcharge. I did some digging and was able to find a 1957 price list. Maybe a 60s one also exists, but I didn't see it. But it states at that time the 3/4 size Les Paul Jr. was still $120, the same price as a regular Junior. So this was slightly custom order status. You're not saving more money for doing this, it's a personal choice. And the basic case, which I believe is the chipboard alligator style, was $13.50. However, if you look at a Les Paul Custom, it was about $375.57, and its case was $47.50. What we have here is just a smaller version of a Lifton reissue case. I would imagine this was probably somewhere around the same cost as the high-end case that you just saw for that Les Paul Custom, because it's got all the appointments. Now, granted, it's only got 3 latches, so maybe it was a little bit different, but at the same time, they didn't make very many of these, so I'm sure the cost was a little bit higher, despite maybe taking less material to produce. So, to put things into perspective for you guys, that's like buying one of the brand new inspired by Gibson custom shop Epiphones for like $1,200 and then buying some $600 road case for it. Because in 57, your $120 guitar coming with a nearly $50 case is just absolutely insane. So needless to say, this is a very rare combination right here. And that is the reason why Kevin wanted to purchase this, because he just wants the case. So I'm going to send this on over to him, and then we are going to consign the Double Cut Junior. So if you like what you see here today, that is available. But he says if it doesn't sell, he'll probably just end up keeping the second guitar too. Sometimes that's the easiest way to get a hard-to-find part. Buy something that's a complete set, sell off what you don't want. The money that you lose ends up being the price of the thing you wanted. Or if you're really lucky, you get it for free. Now, if you're upset and saying, Trogly, how could you help him do this? Separate the case that's been with this guitar for 65 years? Well, if it makes you feel any better, we actually have documented proof this exact case was sold just 4 months ago and added to this guitar. So while error correct, it's not the original one. Well, let's just say who's ever owned this case has definitely used it for its intended purpose. We've got a little bit of a repair on our handle over here. Thankfully, all of our latches are still present. I mean, that's cool to see the Lifton style latch in the flesh. It's got a real latch over here, followed by another clasp over there. But that's it. I did not see any over here on the back. So I hope you enjoyed that crash course of information. Now let's go ahead and throw it onto the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. See if there's any other things to consider, like, is the neck smaller? It feels like it might be, but only by a little bit. So let's go ahead and do all that now. Inside our junior friend, take a look at these tan lines. So the way this works is this is the same finish as you would find on like an SG. They fade as the sun beats down upon them. So what you're seeing here sometimes is referred to as a tan line because it was shaded by our giant pick guard over here, which we can take a second to appreciate. It's just single ply, black plastic, nothing too fancy. But since it sat over top, it shielded everything. But you might notice, what's with our horn over here? Why is that so red? I was really scared that was going to be a touch-up or something, but what it likely was, someone had their strap on it for an extended period of time when it was catching some sun in its case or something, and it was shielding it. That is my best guess on that. Because now that I have the guitar in person, it looks right to me, but we'll blacklight it just in case. But now let's talk about this pickup. Usually a dog ear P90 has little metal barbs over here because that's what makes it a dog ear. And then you secure that and the cover at the same time utilizing 2 screws. However, when I first removed this, that's not the case. This is actually a soap bar P90 in here. And they secured it utilizing 2 screws, like such. And unfortunately, I could not find any photos to find out, is that just the way they did the 3/4 size, or were they just added dog ear P90s that day, threw one of these in there? Here's an up-close look at those particular screws used. Maybe that'll help somebody. Here's the ends of them as well. But also important to check for additional routings. I don't see any monkey business on this one in that aspect. But here's the thing. When I look on the backside, that looks like about what I was expecting. What's really important here is look at this little tan thing. That's called a grommet. From what I understand, around 1962, they switch over from a black one to one that's this color. So that adds more fuel to the fire that this pickup is actually replaced. However, it still appears to be, within the general era, just slightly later. So knowing that and not having the dog ear tangs, I think it's pretty safe to say that this is not the original pickup to this guitar, and somebody has actually drilled 2 additional screws to mount it, as we were just seeing. Now, is it a huge deal? No, but it's good to know. There was a time that these were cheap, so it's very common for people to steal parts off of these to restore other more expensive guitars. But brace yourselves for the backside of this cover. I was expecting some dirt, but I don't know what's going on here. Maybe I should be wearing gloves. People get funny about cleaning vintage Gibsons, so I just decided to let this one be. Within the circuit, that's a perfect reading though, 7.96k ohms. And we just have our regular master volume, master tone control. And thankfully, those appear to be original top hat style knobs. They're looking nice and aged. That's another part that mysteriously disappears off of these. Now, unfortunately, our bridge has been stolen. Bridge, tailpiece, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of a combination of both. It was slightly easier to use intonation set screws. Although, it has been slightly aged to look the part. But check out our neck tenon. So they've just sank this a little bit deeper into the body. And even back in the 60s, you don't have it completely flush there. And I bring all this up because it almost looks better without a pick guard, in my opinion. But you'll always have it, unless you mask everything else off and then sun fade that and just hope they match when you're done. But it's got its own vibe going on here without a guard. But somebody definitely enjoyed playing this thing. They've got this huge gouge over here. There's lots of nicks and dings on the edges. That's probably the most major one. And then you'll see later that there's quite considerable fret wear. Somebody had to have gigged this one. All of our screw heads have a nice patina to them. A bit of rust, some corrosion, everything that the Murphy Lab tries to recreate. As far as body dimensions, I measure about 9 inches on the upper bout. Your lower bout's 13. And just from the body to the bottom, it's 14, with a depth of about 1 3/4 inches. Now moving on from our slab one-piece mahogany body, we've got that mahogany neck with Brazilian rosewood fretboard. Gibson's up until about 1965 will have Brazilian. But here's that evidence I was talking about. We've got fingernail divoting, we've got some fret wear going on. I would say the second fret has definitely seen the bulk majority of all that. Now, can you technically sand this all down, get rid of its character? Sure. However, I think a lot of people end up appreciating the character that it gives the guitar. Just by looking at this, I don't think we're going to have any playability issues, but it seems this was mainly a first 5 frets or so player guitar. Because again, we might have 19 frets on this thing, down from 22 regularly, but despite being a double cutaway model, Yeah, that's going to be tricky to get to those upper frets. So basically, you've got 14 usable, maybe 15. But sure enough, I can confirm a 22 3/4 inch scale. So normally the 12th fret would be at 24 3/4 over here. And according to my feeler gauges, 12-inch radius is a little bit too rounded. I measure it closest to 9.5. But it looks like we've got the original bone nut. However, it's important to note that it's all chipped out on the top. Don't ask me how somebody managed to do that, but it seems like it should still function. It's just a little gnarly over there. I measure it to be 1.59 inches, then 1.99 at the 12th. Although I feel it more pertinent to take it around the 7th on this one, 1.85. Yeah, I think that's why people might enjoy these on top of their reduced scale length. They are quite a skinnier feeling neck, just taking it at a few different locations so you can understand how it changes. Very cool. As far as the profile itself, it's just a nice rounded C shape. Definitely chunks up a bit right here though. Here that is on the contour gauge, 1st and 9th fret. Now we can move on up to our headstock. No funny business up here. It's just our regular Gibson and Les Paul Jr. branding up here. You've got some nicks and dings wear along the edges. You can see an outline where our truss rod cover was on. The cover itself is just black and single ply. But the tuners have been replaced on this one. However, it looks like this one was spared from ever being reamed out for something super large that left washer marks or anything. So it still has that original look. But as far as the truss rod's functionality, yeah, that feels good to me. And here's what it looks like all put back together. Something I've noticed having this on the workbench, if you always thought double cutaways were just like completely the same, they're not. So right by where the neck joins, it's a little bit more squared, and then they start to round it off right there. Once you hit it with the light, you can notice that. That just adds a little bit of shapeliness to the guitar, I guess you could say. Now, moving on to the backside. This is what I was really curious about before I said anything more about that pickup. Yep, there we go. Even more confirmation. That solder work does not look original to me. So while it is some sort of a vintage P90, I don't think it's the original one to this guitar. But if you own one of these and have taken it apart and can verify that these actually had soap bars hidden underneath dog ears, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, that gets my alarm bells ringing. But hey, at least we have our Black Beauty capacitor. But as far as our readable pot code, it's over here on the edge. 1346026. So that makes it the 26th week of 1960, I do believe. The other one's even trickier to see, but it looks like it's about the same. But it looks like 13460, maybe 28. So close enough. They're 500K pots. When it comes to the 50s, every original part is like really expensive to replace, so that's good that we've got those. Here's what the backplate looks like. It's really rounded over on the edges, if that means anything to someone. And look, we even still have the original jack plate. Those things always get broken and replaced. It's a multiply material. And here's our bottom strap button, and one up here at the base of the heel. Then back here is actually refreshing to see. Notice how it's a little bit more cherry than the front. Now it still has some fading, mainly right here. But you can see how it's a little bit more cherry here and down there, as it was shaded. And then the similar phenomenon right over here. The backside of the other shaded horn was also relatively red. And it doesn't look like any neck pocket separations on this one. Although, as is common on ones that get played, it must be like the player's sweat or something. Destroys the aniline dyes. Gives it this cherry sunburst appearance. But we definitely have some areas over here on the edge of the neck where the clear coat has been completely rubbed through. Again, mainly in your cowboy cord area. It's very obvious to see what kind of player was using this one. Maybe a singer. And they just wanted something like this to make chords easier. Now the backside of the headstock appears to be break, crack, and repair free. And at least they restored the tuners with something similar to what's original. These appear to be Kluson Deluxe branded. They've been lubricated. You can see all their grease in that. But our serial number is 22149. So if you get one of these from like 59, it'll still have the ink stamped. But since this one's clearly a mid-1960, we've got that new styling. And of course, it's got the nicks and dings back here too. But now, blacklight test. This will show us the evenness of the finish. If anything glows darker, then we know there's been some sort of a touch-up. All we've got over here are nicks and dings. And now our body, we can see, again, nicks and dings a little bit more clearly. But this area right here, I would say that looks good to me. But again, I don't have tons and tons of experience with the true vintages. But something that does strike me as odd. Look at our pickup cover. It's swirled and marbled, kind of like a tortoiseshell pickguard. I don't think I've ever seen that. I'll have to look at that under regular lighting to see if I can notice that now. I don't know about that. Now we're looking on the backside, as well as our common break areas. I would say this one's original finish. Just well loved and used. Quite fascinating how the neck glows completely even despite the finish fading, and our neck is good. Yeah, here we are in regular lighting again. I don't notice those swirls at all. That's an interesting phenomenon. Must have something to do with how that particular one was crafted. All said and done though, this one weighs 6 pounds, 7.8 ounces. 6.5 is not bad at all. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. Instantly, this thing has a great tone. That's the clean channel, by the way. I will say though, as a larger-handed person, it would take some getting used to. The strings, I mean, they don't feel super slinkier, but there's a little bit more to that. You really have to recalibrate your bends, because my muscle memory tells me the bend should be this, instead of... But you could always put heavier gauge strings on this thing too if you want to eat up some of that flub. I've learned that in episodes like the Pee Wee Les Paul. But I find the sweet spot is right below your P90. Right by the pull pieces, either slightly above or below. But unfortunately, it feels like such a weird location on this guitar to be. Because you really don't have much clearance between the pickup and the strings in that location. It is a very touch-sensitive instrument. And you can work that volume knob. So there we go. We finally documented one of these weird things. 3/4 size junior. What are my final thoughts? If you're like me and you've got big hands, I mean, unless you're on a strict budget, I don't think you need this. This is perfect for someone with the smaller hands or somebody that just wants something, a little bit different from usual, because there really is a learning curve to this as far as all your muscle memory is concerned. Now, was it a bad experience? No. But for me personally, outside of just wanting one of these for its oddity, I don't think I would personally get one, but I can totally see why this would appeal to a certain player. So if you were interested in being the next owner of this one, feel free to check it out on my website, troglysguitarshow.com, or on Reverb, as this one is now in on consignment. All right, troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed learning about the 3/4 size guys, and we'll catch you tomorrow. Take care.